Particular day, I was 14 by then, and I had been cleaning. They had 3 Aranca Champs, and they had a Taylorcraft, and they had an Aircoupe, and 1 Luscombe. But this particular day was a J3 Cub. And so I did the same thing that I washed it, got in it. It was a little windy that day. I started back from the hangar, and of course I found if I could fly it or drive it back with the tail up, I felt like I was flying anyway. So I had the Cub with the tail up, going back to the hangar, and all of a sudden it was flying. And I pushed it down, and it just went faster. It didn't go down any. So the fence was coming, and up I went, and I thought, oh boy. Here I am 14 and I'm shaking, my knees are knocking and everything. So I fly around and decide to start making passes at the runway. And so anyway, after 3 or 4 passes, I figured it felt pretty good down there. I landed and it went okay. So after that, I just waited till everybody was gone, and no matter what kind of airplane, I would just wash it and take it and air dry it. I was and this went on for quite a little while, and one day I was there waiting, and a fellow came out to fly, and the instructor said, "No, it's too windy today. You just hold it." And he said, "It's crosswind and it's too windy." He said, "You can't rent the plane today." And oh, he was disappointed. He said, "I've taken off work to do this," and he said, "I can't get another day off for a long time. Can I go?" And he looked at me and he said, "Lowell, go ride with him. Don't let him mess up." And I said, "Well, I can't fly. I don't have a license and I don't know how to fly." "Oh," he said, "I've been watching you." He said, "You better do a better job at these planes than the pilots do." He said, "Now ride with him and don't let him mess up." So I did, and from 19 to 17, I rode with all the pilots that was having trouble with crosswinds, and I never had a license, but I was riding around. So that just went on and on until quite a bit later, the airport did get an operator, and he said, "Lowell, now I know you've been flying, but," he said, "you know, you're going to have a license one of these days." So finally he shamed me into it, and I had to get a license.
So that's how he got started. Well, now, Lowell, you've been involved with the Benson gyrocopters and rotorcraft and so forth like that. But with that little bit of a background, you obviously knew how to fly with something that basically sit your pants with a little bit of something pushing you from the back side and so forth. And you got kind of connected with Notre Dame Aeronautical Engineering Department on development of the powered parachutes and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that activity.
Well, I had just started going to an EAA chapter similar to this, and that night their speaker was from Notre Dame. He was a professor of Air and Space Division, telling how they had just started to work on this kite that ended up to be a parachute, and they were getting ready to jump it when their lawyers jumped in and said, "Hey, no students are going to be jumping out of a parachute." And so after listening to his story that night, I just went over to him and said, "Hey, I'll jump at any time. I never jumped before, but I thought, how hard can it be?" So anyway, this project here that I got back here in 1960, came to Notre Dame as a kite, and they found out that it had more lift than any parachute. But the greatest thing was the parachute of the day, the best round parachute we had was the military T-10. But if you had equipment on and everything, when you come down, you'd better bend your leg, tuck and roll, we called it, or you'd break your legs. You're still coming down over 15 miles an hour down. And so this had so much lift, if we was done right, we figured we could get a soft landing. So all our testing was to get a soft landing. But there again, we tested this where the ACC buildings are today in Notre Dame. And that's kind of hard to believe, because right there where those ACC buildings are, if you're in the air, you're looking right down the runways of South Bend. And we got by with all this. I don't understand it yet, but we did. But anyway, we went out to test the parachute one day, and it was too windy. They said, "Oh, we can't go, we're going to scrub." And I said, "Well, I drove all the way over here, let's go." So I went up, and sure enough, when I jumped out, got it stabilized.
They towed you up, didn't they?
Not this time.
Okay.
This time, this was finally, we'd actually worked up to where we was jumping out. And so anyway, I jumped out, got the parachute stabilized, and boy, a big gust of wind hit me, and it kind of scared me. And I jerked the line, and it just made a 9-degree turn. I go, well, that's kind of cool. I jerked this line, and I turned another down. And by that time, I'm getting kind of low, so I come in and I land and tell the professor, I said, I believe that thing is controllable. I said, we can steer that. He said, no, you hit it, he said, I saw that. That was a big gust of wind. He said, probably we shouldn't be flying. And now we're doing this where the ACCs are today used to be a practice football field. So we had goalposts and it was a practice field for the real field. So I went up again and jumped out. I think in my mind, I've got to show him that this is controllable because he don't believe this. He was only interested in a soft landing because this would make a name for him if he could have a parachute that you could get a stand-up landing in without breaking your legs. So and he was really looking for recognition. So anyway, I jumped out and decided to make an airport pattern. I fly downwind, make a good square corner, and a final. So I make square corners, and I'm just looking up at the chute because I'm not looking where I'm going. I just want square corners to show him I can control it. When I finally got around, made a base leg, make a final leg, and I'm going in to land, and I look, and there's a goalpost, and I'm going to hit him dead on. Right there. So I pulled the back down, pulled the flap down on it, pulled my feet up, and I just made it through the goalpost, but by doing so, I kind of stalled it, and it kind of went plop on the other side. But the professor came running up, and he said, you made your point. So from then on, we knew that it was going to be controllable, and at that day, we split the class into 2 pieces. One would perfect the parachute, and the other would try to power it. And didn't want to take any time to build up a card or anything, and I was flying a Benson gyrocopter, so I just took the rotor off, put the chute on, and went and flew. And we had a lot of problems with that, because we only had one chute, the one we was jumping. The lines were too short, which made it move back. When it moved back, it had an angle of attack, so I'm dragging it through the air. And it took us a long time to figure some of these things out. And the first one was my copter was called the Lady Gay, because Gay painted it. But it was also Irish Flyer 1, when we made Irish Flyer 2, which was better, and Irish Flyer 3, and then Irish Flyer 4. This was under a contract from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And we fulfilled the contract with number 4 by going down and flying for all the generals down at Wright-Patterson.
Now there was a few episodes that you shared with me. One, you were being towed up with the professor driving the car with a tow rope. You got up several hundred feet and realized that he wasn't slowing down before you got to the end of the thing. Just tell us what happened to that little event.
That was the first, over in that one there, you can see Irish Flyer 2. Or no, 3, Irish Flyer 3. What they wanted to do is to have it controlled, before it was controlled with D-handles, just like you do a parachute. They wanted it hooked up with a control stick so it had the same movements that an airplane do. Turned it to one side to turn, the other side to turn, up and back, go up and down. So we had it all the lines coming down through pulleys in such a way that the controls all worked the parachute. And so for a test, was going to tow up. The professor loaned us his convertible, but he had never did towing for a sailplane before. We had a driver that did this, but he was used to towing sailplanes. The professor gets in there and puts the hammer down and goes the other end. He never looks back, and he's wide open. So I'm above him, really tight, and now he's pulling me down because he's going so fast. He's actually pulling me down, and I know I can't release like that. And we're coming to the end, and he's going to stop, and I'm going to be in trouble. So while he's pulling me down, I pulled the release. It was so much tension, it went up and made a complete loop. I thought, oh, I'm dead. And it come right around, perfect loop, as a parachute. And I went in and landed, and it was just fine. So that one worked okay that time.
Now you had an episode too where you were trying to adjust the angle of attack. That you had a little deal with that when you were flying down. And you got it kind of leveled off. And what happened there?
Well, that was kind of a bad one. Parachutes, as you all know here, these powered parachutes, anybody that's been around a powered parachute, they're slow. They run into 28, 30, 35 miles an hour in that range. But everybody wanted to go fast. They wanted to get this thing so it would really go fast. And in fact, at one time we had ideas that a pilot could bail out and fly it back, and we never had a power supply to really finish that. But anyway, this particular time, we had, I got lost my train of thought.
Well, you were changing the angle of attack on the thing.
Changing the angle of attack, and we had engineered an angle of attack in the wind tunnel that made it the most efficient for lift. So now we reduced that to get less drag for dragging it forward in the air, and it went faster. So we reduced it again, and it went faster. So we did it 4 times, and now we're going 55 miles an hour. And when we hit 55, it started to poison, and there was no way to stop it. It was completely out of control, violently going up and down. And you know, on the down diving, the cart being below it hit the ground, knocked me out, rolled it up. As soon as the weight was off of it, the chute would boom back up in the air, pick up in the air, dive over, and do it again. And it did that. It's on film where it went clear across the airport, close into a cornfield, just kept on doing that. I was out, I broke some legs and stuff, but anyway, we realized that you can't go too fast in a powered parachute.
Well, and mentioning that, there was one time you were talking about having a power pack of some sort. Tell us about what the JATO did.
Well, the same thing. Everybody wanted to fly the same. In fact, we were doing this under a contract from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to Notre Dame. So it was being funded by Wright-Patterson. And they was wanting us to work towards being a pilot bailing out and flying back. And Vietnam was just on. And the way the winds were in Vietnam, when they bailed out, they had enough altitude if they could get back, but the winds all took them to the VC. And so anyway, we got this big idea of putting a JATO bottle under the seat. And so I bailed out. I went out of the ejection seat. I had a Martin Baker ejection seat. Went out, it opened, chute opened, everything, and I electrically fired this rocket. Well, if you know what JATO is, it's basically gunpowder in a can. And I'm going like a bullet straight forward, and the chute's way back, just going like this straight back on me. And I thought, man, I'm dead. There's no way that's going to turn into a parachute. And I thought, well, it's only a 90-second rocket. Well, if you rode a rocket for 90 seconds, it's a lifetime. But as I really thought, I had time to think I'm being dead. I can't get out of this one. But when it burned out, as soon as it burned out, it swung down, parachute was over top. There's no problem. I lighted it back, fine. It worked good.
He's fearless, isn't he? Okay, I'm going to go on to, you were working for a dealer that was handling various World War II trainer planes that you were going down to pick up in Texas and bringing back up, and you experienced some interesting events during that time. Share a few.
Well, I worked for 2 actually different dealers. That the war had ended, and all the surplus stuff was coming on the market. And these dealers were buying it in bunches, really. Usually they had to bid off a certain pile or bunches. And these were, well, Waco and Stearman's, and PT-19s was more PT-19s than anything else. There's just gobs of those things. PT-26, which has got the canopy on for an airplane, and then BT-13s, AT-6s, and so forth. But these are really worn out airplanes. I mean, when the military got through with them, they were wore out. These dealers bought some of these for just the fuel that was in them. And so they're really wore out, and I had a lot of problem bringing some of them home, and I guess I learned to be a mechanic during that time, because I learned to clean the plugs, clean the fuel screens, clean the oil screens before you ever start for home, and then you might make it. A lot of these engines, I would pull them through and you could not find a compression. You couldn't tell where the cylinders were, that wore out. Particularly the 19s really got beat. There was 750 PT-19s at Love Field, Texas at one time being training. And when they turned them all loose and surplus, they were just run out. And I remember the first one, I came back and I had a cylinder go bad on me on the way home. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to land. And I'm looking around for a place to land. And then I thought, heck, I'm above stall speed, it's flying, so let's go on and see what this thing will do. And another 100 miles and I lost another cylinder, so I got 2 cylinders out. They're pumping oil, they're smoking, and now I gotta land. So I find a field that I could probably get into, and as I make the approach, I thought, well, this airplane's flying okay, when am I gonna land, you know? Let's just see if I can hold some altitude here. So if it's above stall speed, I'm going home. So a little, maybe between 3 and 5 miles an hour above stall speed, I took it home. And many of them were the same way. I kind of learned the engines. The Ranger engines that are inverted, it is in all the PT-19s and 26s. They had certain characteristics. The radial engines and the Stearmans and those, the bottom cylinders were usually full of oil. They'd usually fall out on you. You had to expect that a little bit. But one thing about the radial engine is they will keep running. I found that out. I love the radial engines because they could have all kinds of stuff wrong with them. They would still take you home. The flat engines and those, if anything wrong with them, they quit. That's none. But anyway, I was down in a lot of fields with these airplanes. I'd use it to get them down, clean the plugs, get them going again, go another 100 miles or so. Some of them had foul plugs again. When we got them all back, I went down in fields 38 times. 36 of those, I flew them out. I fixed them and flew them out of the fields. 2 of them, the FAA made me take them apart and take them home, but I did fix them and they did fly again. So I never scratched an airplane all the time I picked them up. I never scratched one.
That's pretty darn good. Now you had a time where you were you took a aircraft over to, I think, Ohio, and we're going to pick up an engine from Mooney and then fly it back home. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, that's probably a little my fault. A dealer wanted me to go pick up a Mooney firewall forward for him. So we had a Musketeer for a parts airplane running around. Took the back seat out of a Musketeer. Took the back seat out of the Musketeer, went over to this aerial junkyard, got firewall forward, engine mount, engine, constant speed prop, cowling and everything, put it in the back seat, took off, started home. Earlier in the day, the one radio in the Musketeer went out. Halfway home, the other radio went out, so now I didn't have any communication. And by the time I was getting back, it fogged in on me. And I was trying to, I knew the weather was kind of changing. I was hoping to beat it back, and I got back to Goshen. Just as it fogged in, I shot an approach to Goshen, and this is just telling you that I'm not a good pilot, because I made the approach, hit the fog, deep sight I couldn't make it, poured the coal to it, looked, and the artificial horizon was laying on its side. And about that time, I saw a red barn roof, and I just barely was able to skirt around the barn roof. I was that close in the fog. So I climbed up on top, and by that time it had fogged in everywhere. I didn't know what to do, and I looked, and I got half tanks, both tanks, or not half tanks, quarter tanks, both tanks, and what do I do? No radio, it's all fogged in. I went for some altitude, leaned the heck out of that thing, and headed straight south. I thought my only chance is to get far enough south that the temperature will change at least 2 degrees maybe and clear up the fog. And the one tank quit. I switched to the other tank, which said empty already, but it was still running. And just about that time, I see a red blinking light, and I'm looking at it. I figured, well, there's fog down there, but through the fog, I could see this foggy light blinking. Couldn't figure out what it was, but that's where I'm going, because I know it's going to quit any minute. And as I went down, it was Marion. And I saw the runway. I got down. I was really upset to myself that I got myself in this particular, but I parked the airplane. By now it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I walked into town, got a motel, and the next day I went out, and the tanks were dry. It wouldn't even start. I think I felt it quit on the approach. I'm not sure. But anyway, that was a close one, and it was my fault for not planning ahead and getting everything done. During the way home, I kept thinking, if I crash, they're going to wonder where the rest of that airplane is. It's in the back of the
there are so many stories, and I will just share this with you at this point. He's brought several copies of his book, and he normally charges $8 for them, but just give him $10 for his. Look at him, see how he is? Anyway, there's a ton of stuff in there. One other one too was a plane that had been restored, but the night before you were to fly it back for the new dealer, or the new owner, it had set outside in heavy rain. Tell us a little bit about that little episode.
It had been recovered. It was a Stinson station wagon, 1083. It had been recovered by a real good, reputable shop. This time, before it had been a bad job recovered. This time it was real good. But the owner did not have the money to pay for the job, and so they had set it outside their building. And then he finally was able to pay the bill and wanted me to go get it. So I did, took off. And it had been restored at Elkhart, Indiana. I took off to the east, flying straight east. And on takeoff, the nose started to come up, and I trimmed it down. It come up some more, and I trimmed it down some more. Pretty soon I got full down trim, and I'm pushing the wheel in as hard as I can, and it's still trying to climb. And I think, man, it finally got bad. The wheel's all the way in. I'm trying to control it from climbing by powering back. And I put flaps on, which helped a little bit to get the nose to come down a little bit. And I knew I was too out of control to start making turns and go back to Elkhart. So I'm trying to think, what can I do? Well, years before that, I had made the Shipshewana Airport that is today. I made that with 2 horses dragging a bed spring. So I knew where that runway was, and it was right in line straight on. I wouldn't have to make any turns. So I got there, and I did get down. I landed okay, and started to check the airplane out. They had recovered this airplane. Of course, Stinson's a tail dragger. And I put nice drain grommets in everything, but they had not cleaned them out. Usually we use a hot nail or soldering iron or something to open up the drains. They hadn't opened any of them up. The whole bottom of the fuselage was full of water, and when it clumped up, all the water went to the tail. And I poked them things out and never run water out of that for half a day. So that was just one of the exciting experiences.
Using your head. Oh, by the way, we forgot to mention too, when you were doing the powered parachutes, it was when you were trying to steer that one you mentioned about trying to it just moved the box you were sitting on the seat in. What ended up with that little flight?
Well, it was the little airplane, the little parafoil there, the number 3. So it was the light one that we had the control, and the control stick worked fine, all the controls. It was actually doing wing working of the parachute. So I took off, and it was a little bit windy that day too. And I took off, clung up, seemed to be working, and I turned, and then all of a sudden, I had no control. When I moved the control, the cart would just move like that, not realizing that that parafoil, once it's full of air, is just so solid. You're not going to warp it and move it unless now we had built the light cart. If you look there, you'll see the one little light one has got a small engine on it. It's the first of the 2-cycle engines, and the cart was lighter weight. It made it quick and easy for us to build, and it was easy for us to install the new controls that would act like a control stick. But now it's so lightweight, I'm just hanging under the chute that is real solid, and I move the chute while the cart just does all this kind of stuff as I move the control. But I had no control over the chute, and it was windy, so I'm getting down, and I'm not going to get back to the airport. I tried, there's no way I'm going to get back to the airport. So I'm looking down this road, and finally looking down the road, I know a guy that lives down there, and he's got a real nice yard. So I think I can make that yard. So I got down his yard, and I got down really low, just maybe 2 feet, and cut the engine, and it floated right over just exactly in his swimming pool. I put it right in the middle of his swimming pool.
Well, tell us about the 2 Boy Scouts that you took. The 2.
Oh, the neighboring airport to us is a small airport also, Musketeer Lake, you might know it. And the owner down there had a Boy Scout troop come, and he said, all I've got to fly is a 150. And he said, would you come help me? I had just upgraded the engine in my Luskin to a little more power. And so anyway, he said, oh yeah, oh, no problem. So we flew all the kids and got down to 2. It was a hot day, and he says, I can't fly those. He said, one guy's 285, and the other guy is like 255. And I said, well, no problem, I'll take him. So I get this 285 kid in my Luscombe, where I'm just about hanging out the window, trying to get us both in there. I always take them over their house, and then over the lake. And I took off, and I got past the no return, and the plane wasn't off the ground. And at the last foot of the runway, I pulled it in the air, went flat for a while, finally got it to climb a little bit, and full power, I got to 700 feet, took him over his house, and then turning over his house, I even lost altitude, still at full throttle. Can't believe it. I'm blaming it on the hot weather. And anyway, I go back, I go over the lake, and he's saying, oh, how pretty this is, and I'm thinking, man, we're lucky we're not in it, you know, this is wide open, you know. I go over the lake, go into land, and then I get the other kid in, he's 255, so it should go better. Well, just about the same thing happened again. But I got them both flowing, they were happy, they didn't know the difference, and so anyway, we got all the kids flowing. And the next day, well, I went out to do some work, can't find my tools. And I'm so upset. I think somebody stole my toolbox. Now I got a big toolbox full of tools that I take in my pickup truck and stuff like that, and I looked everywhere. And then I remembered the Goshen Air Florida called me that they had had trouble with a prop seal and wanted to know if I'd come up and take a look at it. And I went up to Goshen, and my toolbox you can hardly lift up. And it was in the baggage compartment of my airplane with those 2 kids. So how it did it, I don't know. I was so far overgrossed it isn't funny.
And I tell you what, this guy's got a lot of stories, and if you want to see a lot more of them, the book is available. Tell us about there was a really unique aircraft called an Airwup that you were part of flying and so forth.
The Airwup was a flying wing. In the 1930s. It was designed by Dr. Snyder from Plymouth, Indiana, so it's kind of local. And in 1933, they flew it to also the White House to Washington. They also flew it to the World's Fair. Milt Hatfield flew it to the World's Fair, and it was so revolutionary. It would go so much faster on less horsepower. It would lift more weight. It would just land like on a pillow, it was so soft. It had so much good characteristics that the other airplane companies thought it might take over the market. And they started sabotaging this. They got to fly it, and they found fuel lines cut, they found control cables cut clear down to 1 strand, all kinds of stuff, and they always caught it. Finally, they didn't catch it on one pilot was killed because they had cut the fuel lines right by the exhaust, and it burst into flames and he was killed. So anyway, this airplane was really revolutionary, and it actually, for the World's Fair, they left Goshen, and one of the race pilots, Art Chester in the Jeep, had landed to Goshen actually to fuel up, and so him and Milt flying the flying wing got knowing each other, and they flew side by side to the World's Fair. Art Chester was flying a NASCO race engine, and this little flying wing had a 36-horse engine in it, flying side by side to the World's Fair. That's how efficient it was. Anyway, Dr. Snyder was promoting this. They had a nice fly-in in 1934 at the South Bend Airport. They promoted that it would take full back stick landings, just like a parachute. You pull you all the way back and just parachute in, power up and go around again, pull the stick all the way back and you just come down. And so anyway, then after that air show, somebody stuffed oily rags in and burned them all up. They had 4 and they burned them all up. Dr. Snyder never recovered. Milt Hatfield, the test pilot, told him on his deathbed, he said, someday I am going to reconstruct this in your memory. Dr. Snyder's daughter come to me and said that she would give me all the test data, the wind tunnel test models and everything, if I would rebuild an ARF in her dad's name. And I said, I just don't know enough about flying wings, I just can't do it. And I said, if Milt will do it, he was the test pilot, I said, if Milt will do it, which he's now 80 at that time, He's passed now, but he's 80. I said, if he'll build it, I'll fly it. So he built number 1 ARF, we call it, and we flew it, and it was very successful, except we didn't understand everything about a flying wing. The center of pressure on a flying wing moves back as it goes, and it tries to climb. The faster you go, the more it wants to climb. And so we had to remake the airfoil, and we had ailerons on the back, and so we had to remake those, and we made ARF number 1, ARF number 2 was much, much better, and it's the one I liked. Then we made ARF 3 that Milt liked a little better than the one I liked. But I did all the test program on those, and the original we knew had this full back stick thing. So I'm flying a test that day, and one of the tests, Milt wanted me to see if it still do full back stick. So every time I come around, I get slower working up to it, and this last time, I had to stick all the way back. The airspeed's on 0, just going like that, almost no airspeed. Coming down, and the left wing goes down, and it's going down pretty much. And I got the stick over the rudder end, and it's, I don't have any control. I'm way down. I think, man, I'm going to crash. The wing was down and going then. Got down in ground effect, it leveled out. It was the smoothest landing I ever made. And then I realized it can land itself better than you can. It gets so much in ground effect, because it's all wing. It gets so much in ground effect, you just pull the stick back and just wait, it'll land itself. And the same way taking off, just a little bit of airspeed, and just like somebody was underneath pushing you up, it'd just go up. It was such a wonderful airplane. And I flew all the test program, but Milt was actually building number 4 to remedy some of the problems we thought we was helping him each time we built one which was better. And he passed away. So that has all been lost. The other thing, at Oshkosh, I did run across Northrop's engineer for their big flying wing, and it's so surprisingly, their head 1 is a girl, and I didn't even take her seriously. She's just such a young looking girl, and they keep saying she's the head engineer, and I wouldn't ask her a question about this trim thing I'm going, you know, and they said, oh, she's got 12 engineers under her. So anyway, I asked her about it. She said, oh yeah, she said the big flying wing's the same way. The faster it goes, the more it wants to pitch up. And I said, well, how do you handle that? She says, look, computers. She said, it won't fly without computers. So that's the way they get by with it today. We had our own little fix for it that was working. But anyway, that was the program. I hated that it died out. It was still one of the best airplanes there ever was. I wish somebody could resurrect it. One of the things during this time, a fellow come to us and testing it, and he says, the original ones, he said, I was the photographer for the World's Fair, and he says, I have 70mm film with that on in the attic. He says, I'm sure it's going to fall apart, but you can have that. And I got 20 minutes of that on video before the film fell apart, and that shows the original one doing full back stick landings and all that stuff. So it's a shame it died out. I wish somebody could take it over. It's a wonderful way to go.
Just a couple more things and then we'll close. Share us a little bit about your Quickie flight.
Oh, a friend of mine built the first plans-built Quickie.
Share with people what a Quickie looks like.
A Quickie has a canard in front, like Burt Rutan's. It's a Burt Rutan design that Gene Sheehan promoted. So Rutan himself did not promote the Quickie, but he designed the canard and all that. So anyway, my friend did a nice job of building, but he's just about done. And it was in the hot summertime, and he got epoxy foisting real bad. He was sweating, and he was rubbing his forehead with the sweat and stuff, and with the sandings, fiberglass sandings, and he got epoxy poisoning, and it just broke out all over. And his dream was to get it to Oshkosh. So I said, well, I and a couple other guys will finish it up. There's a lot of sanding to do. We worked and worked, but we got it done. Nice airplane. And but back then, you had your phase 1 test time was 75 hours, so the 40 hours that there is today. So I flew that thing over and over and over. And the first flight, it was at Goshen. And I had never flown a canard before, so I wasn't familiar with them, but I come down, and this little thing is a little airplane, but I got the nose down, and I'm doing about 150, about 10 feet off the ground, flying past him. And I went right past him, and went to pull up, pull the stick back, and nothing happened. And I'm 150 miles an hour and 10, 15 feet high. And I'm looking out there, and man, there's a tree line, and two trees I figured I'd get between. I rated up, I got between two and missed another one and got around. Got it to about 25 feet and got clear around. And I couldn't throttle back. If I throttled back, the canard in front would drop down as soon as I would throttle back. So I have to land this thing at 150 miles an hour. I can't go any slower. In fact, I was doing about 160 on the approach to keep the nose from dropping on down. At that time, they had 4,500 feet. I used 4,400 of it, or 44. And anyway, I got down, got stopped all right. And what had happened, this was in May, and I had flown through a batch of Maybugs. And they had splattered the front of that canard until it was just like oily, gooey stuff all over the front. And we cleaned that off, and it did just fine. The other thing, just before we got it tested, I was trying to get that 75 hours shot, and I'd flown it a couple hours that day, and all of a sudden I woke up, I got my head against the canopy, and I fell asleep, and oh my. And I looked over the side, and all I see is tall buildings, and I'm exactly over the middle of Fort Wayne. And I'm trying to figure if I got enough gas to get home, and I do, and I get back and everything, but I got the 75 hours on one day. The next day, we head for Oshkosh. And so anyway, the owner decided he was good enough to fly the airplane. So he flew it to Oshkosh. I chased him in my Mustang. And we get on the ground up there, and Bert Rattan comes running over, and he says, hey, he said, that canard, he said, we're working on a rain canard, but he said, don't get it into rain while you're... I said, we all started to laugh. He says, what's so funny about that? And I said, we've already been there, done that. And going home, the owner flew it home. He got into many rain showers and had to keep landing. And then Bert did make a rain canard for us, which was just a cuff that went on the leading edge. And that did solve the problem on the airplane. But that was what we had to put up with.
Now I'm going to set up this next one a little bit. There was an aircraft that was being built by, I think, a high school or a college group. And it took a number of years and a number of participants before it got ready. And you got ready to take off with that and so forth. And you got it in the air and we're flying with it. Tell us what happened after that.
Well, to start with, this was a Pete and Pull. A lot of you know what Pete and Pull was. And the Niles High School class built this. And they built the engine up in auto mechanics class. And they did a needed job. It's got to be a Corvair. And they built the engine excellently, like we was telling them, and converted it for aircraft. And they painted the black cylinders in red case and had it really pretty. Run it in on a test stand and run really nice. And then it took them 11.5 years to finish the airplane. So now it's all together, it's all done. And I'm going to test it. And teachers and students from 11 years come out to watch all this. Started up, run excellent, run nice. I checked it all out. Took off. Miles runway is kind of an X, complete X. And right at the middle of the crossing of the runway, why fire came out of one side of the exhaust and clear back in my arm. Of course, it's open cockpit and I got my arm out. And I thought, oh man, so I see I can't get down on the end of the runway I'm on. So I turned real hard on the other. Same thing, I'm not going to get down. I'm running out of runway. And right beyond the runway, there's just rows of houses on a housing project. I go beyond the houses, but I'm not as high as the roof. I'm just in front of the houses, going down there and trying to baby this airplane. And it's real early in the morning. We did this first thing in the morning. And this lady comes out the back of her house, a sliding glass door. She opens the doors and she's got garbage in her hands, I figured, or a pail of something. And I'm right there, and she just throws it. Well, her house coat came open and she didn't have anything under it, so I said, only a pilot would remember this in a crisis. But anyway, I went on around, missing houses and so forth. I got around to where I could actually get around. There's a lake at the other end, so I had to fly over the end of the lake to turn and get a final. And I got in and landed okay. Well, over the lake I lost another cylinder, so I had fire coming out of both sides now. And I got down, and there was nobody there. And I asked the airport operator, where is everybody? And they said, oh, a plane took off here in Christ down there. They're all down to Christ site. I said, no, they're not. I'm it. I'm here. But anyway, they had run that on car gas, and it had varnished the valves. And as we looked at the valves, they all had varnish pushed up on them. So with a lot of carburetor cleaner and a lot of solvent and everything, we got it running right, and it was a nice airplane, still flies today, and that was years ago. So it was a good airplane.
Now you've restored and actually built some airplanes. Built his own Jenny because he couldn't afford to buy one. And so what's that?
Tiger Moth.
Tiger Moth, that's right. One last little story here. Your one chapter says, I'm not dead. And this is your opportunity to share that little bit of story.
Well, another probably just a poor judgment. Again, Notre Dame was, the engineering talk in 1960 was a rigid rotored helicopter. If you could have a rigid rotor, you could do aerobatics, you could do, for the military especially, you could do all kind of maneuvers that you can't do with the hinges. And then a Chinese scientist comes to Notre Dame and says he knows how it can do it. And they brought in Bendix. Bendix made what we call tie bars that had to be strong enough to hold them rotors on without hinges. And of course I said I'd fly it. And so they put this thing all together, and it takes quite a little while, but it gets all done, and I take off, and I think, man, this is smooth. I've never been in a helicopter that was smooth like this. We really got something. And I don't think I got past thinking that when pieces just went everywhere. And I'm just above the top of trees. I remember seeing a big tree line, and I'm just topping them a little bit. And I thought, boy, I'm dead now. The rotors went, and I rolled over and went down. And I woke up in a hospital. Well, I didn't actually wake up. I'm in the hospital. This kind of gets into the out-of-the-body experience. I was seeing everything there, hearing everything as clear as everything, but I hear the doctor say, well, I can't save him, and my legs were broke, these arms had bones sticking out of my arms and dirt on them, and my back was broke, and my ribs were broke, and about every bone in my body was broke. The blades had actually hit my feet and cut my feet up, so the little bones in my legs was cut. In fact, the one shoe I had, it had sliced the whole real clean, just like you could slice it. The rotor cut that kind of a groove. But anyway, basically I was dead, and the doctor pronounced me dead and told the nurse to roll me back and to tag me for the funeral home and call the funeral home. They had some bad car accidents. Some people were coming in right then, calling in that they'd be in, so they had to get ready for them. So this nurse goes back, tags me and everything else, and I'm wanting to say, gosh, Doc, I'm not dead. I know what's all going on here, I'm not dead. And this nurse sees something, I don't know what, but she goes running down and says, I don't think this man's dead. She does this twice, actually. That's kind of short the story up. And finally the doctor gets mad at her. He said, now we got people coming in we can save, and we can't save him, so now leave him alone. And he used some real bad language to this nurse, and she started crying. Now I feel bad thinking, I'm causing all of this. I'm causing this nurse to feel bad, and I really feel bad about it. And about that point, I wasn't there. I was in heaven. And I tell you, I don't know what your beliefs are, but I was there. And I saw how beautiful everything was. I saw all the people, and I felt drawn to these people. And I felt better than I've ever felt like. I can't even describe it because you just feel so good. I just felt wonderful. And I was drawn to go over where this nice light was. And it's just, such a beautiful area. And it's not like on Earth where you have to turn your head and see. It's like you can see everything. It's so vast. And but about that time, as I wanted to go to these people, I could see there was a big voice that said, you don't have to go back, but if you go back, you got to go right now. And I'm arguing, I'm saying, well, I got a wife and kids, I got to go back, I got things to do, and boom, I was back in my body. And hurt like you can't believe, and I thought, boy, did I make the wrong decision. Well, I had a very long recovery. You know, there isn't time for me to tell you everything, but growing up as a kid, I was very bad. I was the fightingest, cussingest kid there was. I got beat up when I was a little kid, and I got figuring that the big boys was going to beat me up, that I was going to fight, and I did. I was mean. I got kicked out of school more than any other kid has ever got kicked out of our school. And I grew up mean, and I got married, and I was mean to her, and I was mean to my kids. I was not nice. I am not proud of that, but that's the way I was, and I couldn't say a whole sentence without cussing. Man, I was a mean old cussing, fighting God. And when I woke up, that was gone. The cussing was gone, the meanness was gone. I told him, I was on a long recovery. Just to get over this, I was on a long recovery then. And the doctor kept telling the nurse, well, you sure didn't do him any favors by hooking him up. She hooked me up to life support. Said he's going to be a vegetable because I was out of oxygen I had no vital signs for an hour, hour and a half, something like that. And said he's going to be a vegetable. He's never going to walk again. He just can't walk with all those broken bones. I said, he's going to be in a wheelchair. He said, you didn't do him any favors. And I can't talk at this time. I hear all this, but I can't talk for a long time. And I'm just saying, Doc, I'm going to tell you that I am going to walk out of here. Well, a whole summer of recovering and a whole lot of other stuff happened. It's too long to tell, but anyway, I finally did get the thing to go home. They wouldn't let me walk out. I had to use a wheelchair to get out the door, you know. And they said, now you're never going to fly again, and you should never drive a car again. You're just not going to, because you've just been out of oxygen so long. You're just not going to be up to speed. Your bones are not going to be able to let you do this stuff. I went home, got the plane out, and flew an hour. And I never quit flying since. But the good Lord saved me for a reason, and I've been changed since then. Anyway.
Lowell, thank you for sharing your story, and those of you that were interested in his book, he's got several copies. He'd be glad to sign for you and so forth, but there's a lot more stories in the book. He'll be the first one to tell you I'm not here to sell books, but I'm here to tell you if you want to read some good stuff, there's some good stuff in the book. So let's give Lowell a round of applause.